The readout of the college meeting of today, 19th of February 2020. I will give the floor to the Executive Vice President VESTAGER to do the college readout. She is accompanied by Commissioner VESTAGER because together they will talk to you about an important item which was on the agendas of the college today. Executive Vice President, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Very happy to be here with my colleague Thierry. We have, the digital package today, but first a few words on the college as such. The President and Commissioner Hahn, they gave us an overview of the preparations of tomorrow's special summit on the multi-annual financial framework. Then Michel Barnier, our chief negotiator, he updated us on the state of play on the negotiations on the future EU-UK partnership. And last but not least, the college discussed a European Citizens Initiative, which is entitled Start Unconditional Basic Income. In its current form, the initiative fails outside the scope of the Commission competence, and that is the only way we can adopt it or promote it. And that is why the college decided to contact the organisers and inform them of this analysis. And then maybe the organisers will come back. They will have 2 months to do so, to see if they will amend the initiative so that it can move on. Only then we will take the final decision as to whether to endorse the start of the process or not. But most of the time today we spent discussing our digital policy package. And this is a package that is meant to define how we shape Europe's digital future in a way that serves us all. The digital package is composed of 3 components. The first is an overarching strategy communication to set out our vision for a digital society that works for all. Second, a white paper on artificial intelligence that proposes a framework both to embrace the opportunities that artificial intelligence gives us, but also to tackle the risks triggered by this technology. The point, obviously, is to create trust rather than fear. Finally, and very importantly, our data strategy aims to make sure that both businesses and public entities have access to more data and to good quality data, so they can innovate, provide better public services in the way that, of course, fully preserves our rights and values. I will say a few words about the artificial intelligence white paper. Thierry will take you through the data strategy. Just to say a few words first about our communication, this shaping Europe's digital future. This has a clear purpose. We want to make sure that every citizen, every employee, every business, well, they stand a fair chance of reaping the benefits of digitization, whether that means to drive more safely in a connected car, reducing the use of pesticides in agriculture, or saving lives with AI scans that allows doctors to detect a disease, give a diagnosis and start treatment much faster than ever before. And it is a bit like assembling a puzzle. So the data strategy and the white paper on AI today are only 2 pieces of that puzzle. And obviously, only when we have put together the rest of the puzzle, the full picture will be seen. The 3 objectives, or the picture that will come when we have assembled the puzzle, should illustrate 3 objectives. First, that technology should work for people and not the other way around. It is first and foremost about purpose. The development, the deployment, the uptake of technology must work in the same direction to make a real positive difference in our daily lives. And that is difficult to achieve, but still more easily achieved if Europe both shapes and masters such technology itself. Second, that we want a fair and competitive economy, a full single market where companies of all sizes can compete on equal terms, where the road from garage to scale up is as short as possible. But it also means an economy where the market power, held by a few incumbents, cannot be used to block competition. It also means an economy where consumers can be take it for given that their rights are being respected and where profits are being taxed where they are made. Thirdly, we want to continue to live in an open, democratic and sustainable society. And this means a society where citizens can control the data that they provide, where digital platforms are accountable for the contents that they feature. Obviously, this is not just sort of a nice to have. This is a fundamental thing. Because it is a fundamental thing that while we use new digital tools, use AI as a tool, that we build a society based on our fundamental values and fundamental rights. Vice President Jourova will present a democracy action plan later in this mandate in order to address exactly these points also about democracy. Last but not least, a sustainable society where digital technologies actively enable the green transition. As we see it, the green transition will not happen without digital technologies, without satellite data analyzing our crop fields, telling us where resources are being used, how waste can be prevented. We cannot do it without GPS data that allow us to cut the shortest possible routes, minimize driving and spending time on the roads, and of course also the invisible thing like sensors in our water pipes to give us an alert when there is a risk of water being wasted. More than ever, green transition and digital transition goes hand in hand. All of this, of course, not done in splendid European isolation. Europe has been an inspiration to many jurisdictions around the globe, and we will remain the most open region in the world when it comes to trade and investment. But, of course, whoever does business in Europe needs to respect our rules and values while doing business here. So, on the artificial white paper in itself, or the artificial intelligence white paper, because the white paper is indeed not artificial, the major point here can seem very far away from digital because the idea is to build trust. Without trust, we cannot make all the positive things happen. I think you will see it the same way that artificial intelligence is not good or bad in itself. It all depends on why and how it is being used. Artificial intelligence which reproduces human language can make a chatbot much better and give us a better consumer experience. But it can also be used to create fake news and, because of that, jeopardize fundamentals in our democracy. And this is why the paper has a double approach. On the one hand side, create an ecosystem of excellence. Here you find key enablers to make the most of technology, and an ecosystem of trust which mitigates the risk that artificial intelligence may pose to fundamental values, discrimination, causing harm. Ecosystem of excellence is built on 5 priorities. First, and that of course is very on the agenda this week, funding. We need public funding, that be EU funding, national funding, but private funding as well, to fund research and development. Second, for research and development efforts to be more effective, well, we need to make sure that our organization of that is strong, that we have a lighthouse for talent to be attracted, for talent to see that this is a place to go, and also to make sure that we have a network of centres of excellence all over Europe. Thirdly, talent is a thing, but skills as important. We need a lot of people to be able to work with artificial intelligence. Without that, deployment, especially in small and medium-sized businesses, will be way too difficult. And that would be the last thing in creating an ecosystem of excellence, that small and medium-sized businesses, they are invited in. The digital innovation hubs could be an absolute starting point for more businesses getting on board. The thing is that none of the positive things will be achieved if we distrust the technology. If we as consumers, as parents, as individuals feel unsafe, feel that digital technologies, they are not helping us in our daily lives, they are undermining what we stand for. And this is why we have this accompanying idea of an ecosystem of trust. When you look at the technology as such, well, then you will see that it comes all the way from nice to have to life or death. So it is important to try to understand what is the kind of risks that we want to deal with. To start, several specific situations would immediately raise a red flag. That could be when artificial intelligence tackles fundamental values. It could be life or death situation, any situation that could cause material or immaterial harm or expose us to discrimination. And in order then to scope what could be future legislation, well, we would first look at the sector where artificial intelligence is being used. That could be recruitment, that could be law enforcement, could be healthcare and energy. In this sector, you'll find a lot of the characteristics I just mentioned. The second criteria would be then the specific use of artificial intelligence within that sector. If you look at the healthcare system, well, it may be so that an appointment system is absolutely poses no risk to fundamental values, while an AI-assisted surgery may indeed be something that you would want to look at. In case an AI product or service is then identified to pose a risk, well, then we would want to have an enforcement mechanism. That should consist of a thorough conformity assessment to test that the product is safe before it is put into use. And this conformity assessment, that will test a number of obligations. We have based our suggestion on those made on the high-level expert group on ethics to create trustworthy AI. There are 4 of them. First, that AI systems should be trained using data that respects European values and rules, and the record of such data should be kept. Second, AI systems should provide clear information to users about its purpose, its capabilities, but also its limits, so that it's clear to users also when they interact with an artificial rather than a human intelligence. Third, an AI system needs to be technically robust and accurate in order to be trustworthy. And fourth, AI systems should always ensure an appropriate level of human involvement and oversight. If an AI product or service is not identified as high risk, well, it would still have obligation because we still have data protection and privacy, non-discrimination and product and safety liability rules within the Union. And since this is for everything, this is also for toys and for televisions and for any other product, we will assess if this legislation is sufficient or if more is needed to do on the legal front, specifically here. The thing is that when you talk about enforcement, you would want to make sure that national authorities are not left on their own to address individual cases. So in order to make sure that we also have a single market for artificial intelligence, that has passed the conformity assessment, we will need a European governance structure, which consists of a framework for cooperation of national authorities necessary to avoid fragmentation of responsibilities. Finally, it is important to check if it is possible to enforce your rights when it comes to liabilities, because part of the nature of artificial intelligence is that it is opaque. So even though you have your rights and you know that if something happens with the product that you know who is liable, we need to check that you can actually have these rights in real life, depending on how the technology is used. Last but not least, there's been a discussion about artificial recognition, nonsense, facial recognition in the last couple of weeks. In some instances, facial recognition will be harmless. I think by now most people know it. You unlock your phone or you have it in an automatic border control. Facial recognition may also be used to remote identification in public spaces. Here, it is not necessarily just your face. It can be the way you walk, your gait. A lot of different things concerning your body can be used to identify you. It's a very different cup of tea than just opening your phone. With this white paper, the Commission is launching a debate on the specific circumstance, if any, which might justify the use of such technologies in public space. Finally, you know, we are what we eat. Same goes with artificial intelligence. And this is why this first digital package would not at all be complete without a dedicated data strategy. And Thierry, you will take us through that.
Merci beaucoup, Margrethe, de cette présentation très complète sur l'intelligence artificielle. Donc, je vais essayer un challenge très important, exprimé pour la première fois au nom du collège et du travail que nous avons fait avec Margrethe, et je dois dire aussi, Margrethe, avec l'ensemble de nos collègues. Parce que le travail que nous vous présentons aujourd'hui est un travail vraiment collectif et collégial. Un challenge de faire ça en 100 jours. Donc nous allons vous présenter aujourd'hui, et on l'a dit tout à l'heure au collège, donc on pense que c'est la première fois qu'un continent comme le nôtre présente une stratégie cohérente à la fois sur l'intelligence artificielle et sur les données. Donc mon challenge, je vais essayer de le faire en 3 minutes. C'est un deuxième challenge. Comme ça, on va laisser du temps pour les questions. So in order to be even faster, I will speak in English. So the first thing that, and of course, Margrethe said everything about AI. I don't want to come back on this. It's absolutely critical that all our citizens will feel comfortable, and of course that we'll have to put the right set of regulation to make them comfortable and to preserve all our values. But on the other hand, it's true that you cannot speak about AI if you don't speak about data. Because, as Margrethe said, you are what you eat. Same thing for an AI application. AI is, of course, an application. You have an algorithm. But at the very beginning, you have a huge amount of data that you have to run and run and run on machine learning process. And that's why if even you want to see who you are what you eat, but you are what you are. You don't open yourself, you're not open to see what is inside. Huh? So same thing for an algorithm. You don't open it. You just have to make sure what kind of data you use, where they come from, if they are consistent with our regulation, GDPR, for instance, and so on. So the good news, if I may say so, is that in this area, we recognize that we missed the first wave or the first battle, which was the battle of personal data. We missed it, it's true. And we know exactly why. We know that it started in the US with huge platforms. By the way, sorry to say, and don't misunderstand what I will say, it was not rocket science in terms of technology to start these platforms. But it's true that some big platforms 10 years ago, 12 years ago, were able to have a huge success because it was already a coherent internal data market. By the way, same thing in China. And it's true that us, Margrethe, we know that we were a bit too fragmented, but this is also the way we are. And we have seen huge platforms appearing everywhere, not everywhere, but in the US, and including, of course, in Europe. And we know exactly what happened. We know that they were using personal data, our personal data. By the way, Europe reacted pretty well with GDPR, and it was our duty to do it, and congratulations for the previous Commission to have done it. And that's the way it is. But now I say the good news is that we understand what happened, and we know also that what we have in front of us is the fact that we are entering into an era where the biggest amount of data created will come from B2B and industrial sectors. And that's huge. Just to give you another magnitude, today the planet, since the beginning of humanity and now, represents 40 zettabytes, already said that to some of you, 40,000 billion of data. That's our heritage, our legacy in terms of data today. Within the next 18 months, we will just double the number of data created since the beginning of humanity till now. 18 months, we will have on the planet 80,000 billion of data. And most of this data, as Margrethe mentioned, will come mostly from our activities, not us personally, not our way to exchange, but our ability to behave in a more complex environment, thanks to the 5G networks, and of course, entering into the IoT world. And by the way, this number will be multiplied by 2 every 18 months. And of course, it means that here we have to be very careful to understand how these data are created, who will create it, and what can we do with it, including, of course, to use them to build new algorithms and new artificial intelligence applications. So that's exactly where we stand now, and this is why I already said I was in Munich with you, Margrethe, during the weekend, and I say the battle for industrial data starts now, and Europe will be the main battlefield. Why? Because we have in Europe the more coherent, the strongest, and the largest industrial base. And most of this data at the beginning will come from our industries. And that's why, by the way, everyone is extremely interested to see what we will do. So my message here, and our message collectively, is that we made an intense work, and thank you also for our DGs here, including DG Connect, but not only. And yes, we announce you that we have everything in Europe to win this battle. Because no one has the expertise of this battle and the foundation, industrial base, than us. And that's why we say maybe that the winner of tomorrow will not be the winner of tomorrow. The winner of tomorrow, sorry, will not be the winner of today or yesterday. And this is where we stand. So what do we need here? And what we will present again quickly in this document that you will have time to read. 3 things. First, a regulatory framework, including a data act to unlock unused data. In other words, a single market for industrial, public, B2B data. And by the way, one of our colleagues this morning, we had a long session, Margrethe, said, wow, it is probably as important as when we created the single market. Yes, it's true, when you see the importance of what is at stake. And of course, in this first dimension, let's say, we will work and present some rules on data access, sharing data, extremely important, use, reuse, anonymization, and so on. The second pillar is based on infrastructure and platforms. In order to run this data, you need to have specific platform. And you'll remember the session we had for 5G. We already explained that it will be mainly diversified on a pervasive way. Remember the 80-20, 20-80? Most of this data will be created locally and processed locally, thanks to 5G critical networks deployments, but also locally to have edge devices. By the way, by 2030, we expect on the planet to have 500 billion connected devices, 500 billion. And of course, all these devices will exchange information extremely quickly. And here, of course, we need to have then specific, call it the way you want, mini cloud or edge devices to store this data and to interact locally with the applications, AI applications embedded on top of this. And believe me, the requirement for these platforms are not at all the requirement that you see on a personal B2C platform. Because, of course, when you exchange information on your favorite social network, okay, it's difficult, but that's fine. But now, when, as Margrethe said, it is just to make sure that in a hospital the robot is accurate, or that a connected car will take the right decision immediately, that's another story. Huh? And then we need, of course, robustness. You need, of course, security and cybersecurity everywhere. You need to have, of course, latencies. You need to react in terms of milliseconds, not tenths of seconds. And that's a totally different infrastructure. And we have the tools here. We have the companies in Europe being able to do this. And by the way, nobody in the world today is doing it just because the market was not ready. But the market is here in Europe. So that's why we will launch also European Industrial Cloud and Platform Alliance to have all companies interested here to be able to answer and to build these platforms. And we want to mobilize up to 2 billion euros in order to create and to help this alliance. Of course, we will also we have a very interesting infrastructure today in HPC, high performance computing, it's called EuroHPC. We may use it also to have a specific platform here for public data in the academic world and research. The third pillar is sector-specific actions to build specific European data spaces, for instance, in industrial manufacturing, Green Deal, mobility, health, cities, and so on. And here, of course, putting in place the right governance rules in between. So that's basically what you will find in this document. Of course, we will answer with Margrethe to your questions. One final word on platforms, if I may. The role in our society and economy is, of course, to protect our people and our markets. And Margrethe said very well. But I am very clear. It's not us that need to adapt to today's platform. It is the platforms that need to adapt to Europe. By the way, this is the message I think Margrethe and myself deliver to the CEO of this platform where they come to see us, like a few days ago. And by the way, in this dimension, I will always prefer soft law and dual governance, shared governance, than, of course, regulation. But, of course, if they don't find the way to behave the way we need for our people, but we will have to regulate. And we are ready to do this, as you know, in the Digital Service Act at the end of the year. So that's basically, I missed my goal, my target. I think like the number of data, it's not 3 minutes, but 6 minutes, I double it. So sorry for that. Q&A, please. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Thierry. I have, in this process of making the white paper and the data strategy, under quite time pressure, it has been inspiring for us to listen to our President, von der Leyen, because she says that with new technology should not come new values. That is so fundamental, and I think it is very well put, because this is the idea, to have the best possible tools, to use them in the best possible way, but to stay loyal to the fundamentals, those that has brought us to here. And this is not just about protecting ourselves. It is also about technological sovereignty as Europeans. And that is a concept we have been discussing a lot because it can be easily understood or misunderstood as something that is turned towards other people. But it's basically just about ourselves. It starts by ensuring our data infrastructure, our networks, to make sure that they are robust and resilient enough to reduce our dependency on other parts of the world, especially, of course, when it comes to crucial technologies. As I previously said, my pledge is not to make Europe more like China or more like the US. My pledge is to make Europe more like herself. And on that basis, work with the rest of the world. And I think this package that we have presented today is a good step in that direction. Of course, this is just the very beginning, because today we launch a 12-week public consultation. We invite every strand of society from all of Europe to come back to us in order for us, with that input, to assess it and start preparing what may be needed in legislation, but hopefully also to launch, as Thierry just said, investment and funding that will allow us to make the most of all the promises that technology holds. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Breton. I also missed my targets because I skipped your name at the beginning. So
No,
AI.
I feel very honored and comfortable. You can continue to use it.
So
this is Margrethe and this is Mr. Vestager. That's fine.
So AI enhanced moderation is perhaps the future because it's stress-free. So we now take a few questions. We will first want to focus on the digital package, and then towards the end we may also take questions linked to the other items on the college's agenda. So the gentleman there was first.
Javier, Financial Times. In the digital strategy paper, you talk about platforms that may have a special obligation to, from what I heard from people, for instance, share data. And I just wonder if you could be a bit more specific on the GAFAs, whether you would force them to share data and how that might work, as a consideration, as I understand that.
As said, we have a special consideration for dominant incumbents because the role they play in the marketplace is a very different one from sort of more old school dominant incumbents because of the dynamics of the data economy, network effects, the data, how easily you can lean in on a neighboring market. But we have not put pen to paper as what should be the exact obligations. The first thing is more for us to make sure that the people who provide the data to the platforms, that they have full access to the data that they themselves are creating in that respect, so that they can actually use them and make full use of them.
Okay. Next is Valentina.
Hi, Valentina Pop with the Wall Street Journal. Still on the platforms and their market dominating position, when you say you haven't really penned them down, you do have like quite a track record of competition cases that might have informed you where the problems lie in terms of platforms using data they pull from smaller players on the platforms or smaller rivals, and then using that data to quash competitors. Is that a direction that you will be inclined to regulate? Because, as you've said, fines don't work. Thank you.
Well, fines work in that respect that they punish illegal behavior in the past. Cease and desist decisions make you stop what you're doing, not to put anything that has the same effect in place. So far, so good. Past is punished, illegal behavior has stopped. Then what about the future? What to do in order to repair the marketplace if that marketplace for your rivals have been de facto ruined? And here you see that with the cases that we have so far, this is work in progress. In the first Amazon case, where we stepped in very early and took commitments, the market remained open, and you still see competitors in e-books thriving out there. If you take the latest, the Android case, it still remains to see if the preference menu will actually work and allow others to be chosen by consumers. But the thing here is to consider what kind of sort of obligation do you have, no matter the specific investigation that we may go through if we have a suspicion that something illegal is at stake. And as said, this is now on our workbench. The most obvious one is what has been asked of us, of our President, the Digital Services Act. What are the responsibilities you have on content? The second thing that we're now also pushing is a discussion about what are your obligations, sort of without considerations of sort of illegal behavior, but because you are a dominant player in a digital world, to reconsider that, because it's a different creature than what it was in an analog world, where marginal cost was still a thing that you would have to consider, where data traveled much, much slower than what they do today.
And there's something else I would like to add. I'm responsible for internal market. And I see that today you have some position of these platforms where you see this platform being in a position to be a gatekeeper. And that's not what we want for our internal market. So we will have to watch this extremely carefully in order to have, again here, not to create not natural barriers that obviously we start to see. So here, of course, we will have regulation ex ante, and by the way, we inform these platforms.
Please.
Thank you. Samuel Stolton, Euractiv here. I have a question about the AI white paper, if I may. So in the scope of high-risk AI technologies, the Commission has identified a series of critical sectors and critical uses. However, the Executive has stopped short of identifying technology manufactured from outside of the European Union in certain authoritarian regimes as potentially high risk. Do you have full faith, therefore, that AI tech manufactured in certain autocratic countries worldwide is not of any risk at all to European citizens?
That's a very good example. But you have two aspects of high risk. The one you're referring is, of course, the fact that when you use an algorithm for specific application, you can use it. We say high risk when it has a strong impact on you, on your life, or on the society. And of course, here we need to watch carefully. And when we say carefully, it means, of course, what the algorithm is doing. But I just remind you something. In an AI world, the algorithm is reacting on a probabilist action, not determinist. This is why you need to understand also what is the algorithm, and you need to understand the data set. Because regarding certain data set, you may have a certain outcome versus others. And this has nothing to do with the situation you mentioned. But it's true also that for some specific applications, you will need to know also, if it is personal data, how they are being used. Is it legally? Is it illegally? Do they respect our value or not? And this is a subject that we will have to monitor. For some specific applications, very critical, we call it critical ou des enjeux majeurs, we may ask to make sure that it is compliant with everything, to retrain the algorithm locally in Europe with European data. We could be ready to do this if we believe it is appropriate for our needs and for our security.
Next question, yes, please, here.
Thanks. Natalia Drozdiak from Bloomberg. Just a question about the Digital Services Act and where you might look at the liability for platforms. Do you have any sense how you might overhaul those rules at this point? Are you committed to giving platforms more responsibility, legal responsibility for what users post on their sites? Thanks.
Well, as you may have seen, we have been extremely busy, just getting so far in actually less than 100 days, both with a far-reaching idea about where to go and how to use digital tools with AI and with scoping the data strategy. So the Digital Service Act, that is for later. But what you see in our mission letters is a very sort of clear working description that there is also a responsibility for what you actually carry of content. And how we will put that pen to paper on those issues, that still remains to be seen. But it is very clear that we have the ambition to say, well, you have a responsibility when you are a content provider, one way or another.
If I may add one word. We will do this within the next 8 months, it's for sure. And everybody knows the rules. Of course, we are entering here into dialogues with these platforms. And like with any dialogue, we don't know exactly yet what will be the outcome. We may find, at the end of the day, a good, coherent joint strategy which will fulfill our requirements, especially for everything that we have to take care and, regarding the responsibilities of the platform. And by the way, this is why personally, when I meet with them, I said, I will always prefer a shared governance. But we have been extremely clear. If it doesn't work, then we will have to regulate. But again, nothing is decided. Like Margrethe said, yes, we are in this discussion, but time is running.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, the gentleman there.
Thank you. Nicholas Wallace for Science Magazine. I appreciate the challenge of explaining all this in 3 minutes, as I have a word limit. But as Vice President Vestager just said, the staff at DG Connect were only given 100 days by President von der Leyen to deliver all of this. So my question is, why the urgency? Why did this need to be turned out so fast? Would 200 days have been a problem, or is there something really pressing here that we had to address?
Well, I think there is a sense of urgency, yes. Because as Thierry, I think, so passionately showed it, here Europe is not just following. There is a real potential of taking the lead. We have strength when it comes to business technology. A lot of industrial high-quality data is being produced right now. To be able to put that together, to make the most of it, that gives us a sense of urgency. And second, the question about how to use artificial intelligence to make sure that you make the most of it while managing the risks, well, that's a complex thing because there's the origin of the technology, there's the sector it's used in, it's how exactly it was used, what data was used to train it. And here we find that, well, it is important that our democracy can deliver solutions, but not without listening, and listening very well. And this was why we found that it was a sense of urgency to get the public consultation started so that we get an input from scientists, from businesses, from NGOs, from governments all over Europe, from people who take an interest, in order to see that a democracy can make a frame to manage risk, but also enable so that we as citizens get the most of it. And I think that sense of urgency has been the driver through these first, actually less than 100 days that had allowed us to put this strategy in front of you.
And to be very honest with you, we have to acknowledge that we didn't start from scratch. A lot, I was impressed. Of course, Margrethe, you were already here, but not me. And when I joined, I was impressed by the work which has been done by the previous Commission, existing already in the Commission, in the DGs, a lot of work, already a lot of discussion with many stakeholders. This is a very important subject, and by the way, any member states, most of the member states, have already, for some of them, issued their own vision. And I think it was time for us, by the way, this is also our mission, to put everything together and to have this coherent vision that Margrethe explained beautifully for AI, but also, and here, believe me, in industry, there is an urgent need immediately. We will not be, in 6 months it will be already something different. So yes, if we want to announce this alliance that I described, we better do it now.
And maybe just one more thing, excuse me, Dana. We do not feel that we've been doing this in just by the Commission. One of the things that impressed me was that 350 businesses were ready to take on board as a pilot the ethical principles that were suggested by the high-level group to create Trustworthy AI. Because these 7 principles, they were translated over into a questionnaire, and this is the Commission, it wasn't short. It was a long one. And they used that and they figured out what works for us. How can we actually do what we want to do by using these criteria and be part of the process? And what has gone into here is also the response from you 350 participants who've been pilot testing how to work with ethics when you do artificial intelligence.
A few more questions, perhaps. The gentleman in the middle.
Hi, Vlad Maximov with Euractiv as well. My question is linked to what's been discussed before, and in particular to the Commission's drive to foster synergies of projects that are already being implemented across the EU. One specific example that's been mentioned in the paper is Gaia Xi of Germany. And so the Commission will try to facilitate MOUs with member states by the end of this year. How does the Commission envision the content of these MOUs, and what are the concrete sort of steps beyond 2020 that these MOUs are designed to facilitate?
That's a very good example of the urgent situation where we stand in order to have a coherent approach at the level of the whole EU. And it's true that Gaia X is a good project. By the way, I spent a lot of time myself. I knew the project before joining the Commission. I knew very well the project. And I had a lot of discussions with Peter Altmaier, and you know that he's keen behind this strategy. And we believe that what we present, and especially, you understand that we have 2 pillars in the infrastructure. And Gaia X, for all of you, is precisely what I described as the need to have a specific and secured, let's say, open and secured and scalable cloud, specifically for things that we discussed today, and mainly in the public environment, but not only, if I want to summarize. And we believe that we have today a tool to do this very quickly, including, by the way, everything, all the work which has been done with to start the strategy of Gaia X, with what we will present as an open platform solution close to the HPC strategy. Because at the end, it is connected, it is related. You need computing power and you need secure platform. So we are into discussion with the Gaia X founders, and we believe that will be that could join this initiative. But of course, France, for example, are also another initiative. We meet them, and we believe that here we could have a coherent strategy for Europe. But then, of course, there is a second. The alliance is more for the totally private world, like any other alliance. And this is where we need probably a big 2 billion euros investment, and we know where we will find this money, which is a lot of money.
Thank you. I think Hayo is next, and we are getting slowly close to the End of this press conference.
Ja, Hajo Friedrich, Deutsche Handwerkszeitung. Auf Deutsch würde ich gerne fragen, wenn das möglich ist. Die erste Frage geht an den Binnenmarktkommissar, Herr Breton. Sie haben jetzt mehrfach den Binnenmarkt für Ihre Zuständigkeit erklärt und gesagt, Digitales ist ähnlich wie der Binnenmarkt. Meine Frage ist, haben Sie auch ganz konkrete Gesetzesprojekte der Vorgängerkommission in den Blick genommen, wie zum Beispiel den European Service E-Card? Da geht es um Digitalisierung, da geht es um den Binnenmarkt. Dieses Projekt ist im Europaparlament blockiert. Wie soll es damit weitergehen? Welche Lektion haben Sie daraus gelernt? Sie machen jetzt wieder sehr große Ankündigungen, was die digitale Zukunft bringt. Hat die Kommission gelernt, was aus dem Loblied auf das Internet vor 20 Jahren geworden ist? Wir sind jetzt nur dabei, gegen Fake News, gegen Missbrauch zu reden. Wer versichert uns das, was Sie jetzt rosa in die Zukunft malen, dass uns das in 10 und 20 Jahren nicht wieder um die Ohren fliegt? Dankeschön.
Oui, bien sûr qu'on apprend du passé, c'est certain. Et en particulier, si vous me demandez en regardant bien ce qui s'est passé au cours des dernières années, c'est qu'évidemment, en ce qui concerne la nature sur Internet, parce qu'au début c'était Internet avant de parler des plateformes, la liberté sur Internet est quelque chose qui est précieux. Et dès que vous parlez de ces sujets, ce n'est pas toujours aisé d'aligner les États membres. Ça, pour être clair, je crois qu'on a tous appris de cela. Alors, maintenant, sur les e-cards, par exemple, c'est vrai que c'est bloqué. C'est vrai que c'est quelque chose qu'on va regarder. Mais je l'ai dit, il ne s'agit pas de réouvrir les directives qui existent aujourd'hui, parce qu'elles ont été très compliquées à mettre en œuvre. Elles ont 20 ans. 20 ans, c'est beaucoup, mais c'est aussi assez peu. Donc on va essayer de voir comment on peut, avec précisément ceux qui sont un peu bloqués, débloquer la situation. Maintenant, sur le deuxième volet, sur les contenus, on en a déjà parlé. Il y a maintenant des règles et des obligations qui sont très strictes sur les contenus haineux, sur les fake news, sur les appels au terrorisme. Et tous ces sujets-là sont aujourd'hui parfaitement identifiés et précisément demandent d'avoir une autorégulation par les plateformes. C'est très strict. On va le vérifier, on le vérifie de façon maintenant très contraignante. Il existe des outils qui n'existaient pas il y a quelques années et qui sont maintenant mis à la disposition, ou que les plateformes peuvent se mettre elles-mêmes à la disposition, c'est de contrôler automatiquement dans les catégories qui sont des catégories qui sont interdites précisément par la loi, contrôler les contenus qui pourraient précisément être en infraction, et notamment par le biais de systèmes à base d'intelligence artificielle. Il y en a de plus en plus. Donc on est au début, là encore, mais c'est la raison pour laquelle soit on mettra des obligations strictes pour qu'il n'y ait plus de ce type de contenu la fin de l'année ou l'année prochaine, soit si jamais les plateformes ne peuvent pas le mettre ou ne veulent pas le mettre, on sera obligé d'être encore plus contraignant. Et on en est vraiment à cette phase-là.
Just one thing to add, because I think you're completely right to say that in 20 years' time, digital will look very different, just as it looks different today than what it did 20 years ago. But what we're saying today is that we have the willingness to suggest that we shape Europe's digital future. And that is a responsibility for our legislator, for the people who are elected by their voters. And we're here to pave the way for that to happen. And I think this is the European model. Over the decades in our democracies, we have been willing to say, these things, actually, we don't want that. Take agriculture. Some of the most damaging pesticides, they've been banned because we didn't want to take a chance on biodiversity or drinking water. And yet a lot of other pesticides has been allowed with proper safeguards. And we have done that knowing that, of course, that there would be a downside to this. Some could have had good use of the pesticide that was banned. It's a European model to say, well, this we don't want to do, this go, go, go. And this has brought us to here. It's the best place to live ever on this planet, especially if you're a woman, and that also, there is a gender thing to this as well. And I think it is important now to say we have the willingness to do this, because shaping our future, that is what democracies are for.
Thank you. 2 last questions, please.
Lewis Croft, MLEX. 2 questions for the Executive Vice President. Firstly, in the communication, you say that there'll be a sector inquiry this year. Could you give us some indications of your thinking on what sectors have caught your eye? Is it ad tech or transport or booking or whatever? Secondly, also in the communication is a review of competition law 2020 to 2023. So that's most of this college. Can you give us some thinking, give some insight into your thinking on that, particularly as regards data sharing? What you want is, I understand, SMEs, smaller companies to be able to share data more easily. However, there's long been a trade-off against privacy laws and against competition laws, how that's going to work. Can you give us an insight into that? Thank you.
On the sector inquiry, we will do as asked by the presidents. Find a sector where there are novel aspects and where there is a sense of importance as to how our economy will develop. But we have not finalized our thinking yet. On the second question, a lot of people come to us and say, oh, we would like to cooperate, but we are afraid that you will see a cartel. And then we say, well, come to us with your more specific proposals as you want to do, and then we will make sure that we see no cartel. Same thing here. Of course, we would very much like people to share data, pool data, reuse it in the best possible way, and to give guidance so that it's not organized in a way that could be a data-driven cartel. And that guidance we would like to give, of course, specifically, and that we can give today. But we're also reviewing both our horizontal and our vertical block exemption guidelines so that people can also see there, well, what are sort of the main routes. But if someone comes this afternoon, we stand ready to give specific guidance as to how to set this up. Because these are things that are happening right now. And as you suggested, it takes a little bit of time before we have had public consultation and considerations and are ready to launch new guidelines. And this is why, of course, we invite people to come as of, some time ago to ask specific guidance to be able to do this.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions. Well, I actually see one here, please. The last one.
So it is Zoe Didili from New York newspaper. What we have today, as far as I see, algorithms are trained by humans and operate on the basis of the real world facts, which explains why many times algorithms can produce discriminatory results, the societal bias. So my question is whether this commission believes the training algorithms will be enough to mitigate the risks, as the Commission President said, without first confronting the stereotypes that influence the trainers of algorithms and shape the bias. Because at the end of the day, the opacity of an algorithm is less of a problem than the actual facts based on which an algorithm operates. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, sorry. That's exactly what we talk about today. This is all the chains that we have to make sure it's compatible with our values. And you're absolutely right. It's not only the algorithm. It is also the result that we can see. So we have to make sure that everything all along the chain will be compatible with the values that we discussed today. And this is why this is a quite complex exercise that we present today. And I think, Margrethe, unique on the planet. We are the first one to do this. We will make sure that your question will be addressed during this 100 days consultation. But again, I insist, in order to avoid what you mentioned, which could infringe our way of living and our values, we will have to make sure that we check everything all along the chain.
I think you're perfectly right. And the thing is that we as humans, I think, can live with the fact that we were not successful today, because we will do our best to be successful tomorrow in non-discrimination and doing our best. Problem is when you have all what we as individuals do summed up by a machine, then you're really confronted with the world as it is. And this is why when it comes to skills and attracting talent, the most obvious thing is to attract a more gender-balanced set of people to work with artificial intelligence. And to make sure that when you use data, that you know the quality of your data. Because if the quality of the data is such that they are basically only usable for one purpose, well then it should be labeled only usable for one purpose. Or otherwise you'd have to do something specific to counteract the bias that is in the data, so that you as a user will know. There's a number of medical tests that are made mostly on men. May not be the same if it works on women. I think even more clear, there are molecules in pharmaceuticals that work in one way, in one race, and a different way in a different race. So it's very important, if you do not have full data sets, that you label, well, this is what this has been trained to do, so this is what it can do. And if you find that you are capable of correcting the bias, well, then that you can do that in a qualified way of doing it. Because otherwise, you end up in a situation where you do not know what is actually happening.
All right, Executive Vice President, Commissioner, many thanks. Good afternoon to everyone.